So with the Season 5 update, we've had some new weapons being added into the game, and also halfway through last season we got some weapon balancing as well as some additions to other weapons as well, especially guns like the CX-9, which have been rumoured to be coming out for a while. And in this video we're going to be going over what are the best weapons, ranking them from best to worst inside Warzone. If you enjoy weapon stat breakdowns and weapon comparisons and overall tips and tricks for Warzone, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we're trying to reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers, and click that link in the description down below and subscribe to our second channel. We'll be posting extra content over there as well. And like I said, the main focus for this video is to go over the main weapons. Now we're not looking at RPGs or riot shields or melee weapons and all that kind of stuff, because to be completely honest, they are pretty niche. Only some of the launchers are pretty viable, like the RPG for example. Riot shields, I just don't want to condone that kind of behavior. And then when it comes to melee weapons, they are pretty niche, so you need to be at close range. I do feel like melee weapons are a bit more viable than they were before, and that is because the SMG TTK has been increased and has made them less viable as they were before. So the melee weapons are actually quite a good option. The amount of times I've actually died to melee weapons has actually been ridiculous in Season 5. So when it comes to the tiers, we have the meta weapons, which are the best weapons in the game. Everyone's going to be using them. You'll see them all the time. We have the top tier upper category, which I've added in recently because I feel like there's some top tier weapons that are slightly better than others. You've got the top tier lower, which is guns that can actually be used. You can still do well with them, but you do need a bit of skill, or you are going to be slightly disadvantaged compared to these meta slash weapons. And then we've got the usable guns, which you can use if you just want to try it out because it's maybe your favorite gun or something like that, for example. Then we've got guns that I would just never recommend using, which are garbage. And then where melee could actually perform better than some of these weapons, then that is where some of these guns are going to go. So let's get through this list pretty quick. So in terms of sniper support, the Cold War AK is a pretty meta weapon. I do think it's a really good option. As a long range AR is not so good, and that's why I'm going to put it in top tier upper, because it's not really that versatile. The best way to use this weapon is definitely sniper support, and it doesn't really work well as an SMG anymore either. So you do need to use it for that one case scenario, but in that case it does perform extremely well, so that's why it's going to be in top tier upper. The regular AK is definitely usable, nowhere near as good as the Cold War AK, so it's definitely going to be unusable. The AMAX is now a top tier lower weapon. You can still use it and do really well with it, but it's not going to perform as well as probably most of the Cold War ARs in the game now. AN-94 is a fully auto assault rifle, so you can still use that. The AS-VAL is pretty good now. It's got a really decent TTK, and the only issue with this is for quads and trios, so I wouldn't really recommend it for anything outside that. That's why I'm going to put it on top tier lower, even though it has one of the fastest TTKs in the game now. The AUG is usable. You can use it if you put the correct attachments on it, but if this is ground loot, it's just not going to be that usable. The FAL is kind of usable as well. Semi-automatic, so a bit harder to use, but like I said, it's still usable. It's not a bad weapon by any means at all. The FARA is definitely a top tier upper weapon. The recoil is a bit weirder than some of the other weapons that we're going to discuss, but it's still a great long range option inside Warzone. It actually has a slightly faster TTK than some of the guns like the Krig, for example. The FR556 is just a garbage gun. I would not use this. I'd rather use my fists, even if I was using this at close range. It's not even close to being one of the better burst fire weapons either. So next we have the Grau, and the Grau is definitely a top tier lower weapon. It's still pretty good for Warzone, and for this reason I'm actually going to move the FFAR down, because it's nowhere near as good as even the AS-VAL in my opinion as sniper support. But the Grau definitely is a solid weapon for medium, long range, or even close range depending on which barrel you put on it. It has pretty low recoil, TTKs are not too bad, so it's definitely a decent weapon. The Groza is actually better in my opinion than the FFAR, especially if you're using it as sniper support, so I would definitely put the Groza above the FFAR. That's why I've moved this down here. The Kilo, again, is a usable weapon, but honestly there's so many other weapons that are more viable than this, especially for those longer ranges. The Kilo has 3 damage drop-offs, and that is the issue with this gun. Now, a lot of people do recommend using this gun below 80 meters, which it does perform relatively well, but let's be completely honest, you'd rather have like a Cold War AK or something else instead, or even a FARA would be better. So I would not really use the Kilo over those weapons, and it doesn't even perform as good as these weapons right here in my opinion. The Krig is a meta weapon. It is still a really solid weapon to use at long range. It's one of the best, if not the best at the moment, because a lot of people are choosing it due to the low recoil. M13 in my opinion is actually slightly better than the Kilo. I would actually pick this weapon now, especially after the buff it got last season, over the Kilo in my opinion. The M16 is viable, or it is usable just like the AUG from Cold War. But again, it's not going to win you tons of games or anything like that. The M4A1 is top tier lore, just with the rest of these weapons as well. Fairly automatic, decent at range, but not anything special. The Odin is usable. It has a good TTK. The QBZ is definitely a meta weapon. Low recoil, very similar to the Krig. The Krig just is a little bit more consistent in my opinion, even though the QBZ has the higher damage profile. But I think it's due to the fact that the recoil with the QBZ actually stops at a certain point, but the Krig just continues, as everyone's gotten used to. Next we have the Ram 7, and again, along with these weapons right here, is definitely not one of the better weapons anymore. Any skilled player could use it, but there's honestly better options now in the game. The Scar H, even though it got a buff, it's still just usable. The mag size kind of lets it down quite a bit as well, but there's also other harder hitting weapons in the game now as well, so even for that reason, it still can't go any higher up on this list. The XM4 is definitely a meta weapon, one of the most versatile weapons in the game still. You can use this as an SMG, you can use it as sniper support, and you can use it as a long range rifle. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't do any of these extremely well, but it does do most of these very well. So like I said, you can use this gun for pretty much anything. The Cold War MP5 is definitely still a good SMG. It's not the best SMG in the game, and I don't think is up there with some of the best, but I would still highly recommend it. It has a decent TTK up close, and it also has the Cold War movement, so it's definitely a top tier upper SMG. P90 is usable, but not great. I mean, I would actually put it in... it's usable, it's fully automatic. The Bison is definitely slightly better. It did get a damage buff recently, but again, it's still in the usable category, although I have seen a lot of people use this more and more often. ISO is garbage, let's be completely honest. MP7, a lot of people have been using this again. It is good because it has low recoil, and considering most of the SMGs got a TTK nerf really hard, this is a top tier lower SMG in my opinion. Striker, I'd rather use my fist to be honest. Fennec is pretty garbage as well. Modern Warfare MP5, I feel like a lot of people are still using this weapon. You don't get Cold War movement with this gun, so I'm going to put it in the same as top tier upper. It does have the TTK though, but you just don't get that movement, which is something I feel like is super important when it comes to SMGs. But the Uzi, which is usable / garbage to be honest. When I use it in Rebirth, it's just not good to be honest. The Modern Warfare AUG is definitely top tier lower. It has got a good TTK overall, but the movement again is just not there with the other weapons when it comes to Cold War anyway. DMR is actually usable. When you find this as ground loot, it actually performs okay. Type 63 or whatever it's called is garbage. It's just a bad DMR. KSP, no one wants a burst fire SMG, man. It's just stupid. I don't know why that would be in the game. Then we've got the Milano. Milano's still pretty good. I would still choose it over, personally, than the Modern Warfare MP7. I don't think it's as good as it was before, and they did nerf the TTK on this gun again, so it's just something to keep in mind. But it does have the Cold War movement. You do get good damage values at long range with this gun. LC10 is definitely usable. I would say it's in the same kind of tier as these SMGs right here. Still pretty viable. Most of the Cold War SMGs are pretty viable now, to be honest. We've got the PPSH, and I think this is definitely a top tier upper SMG as well. It's got the Cold War movement. It's got one of the best movements in the game, actually. And overall, the recoil control in this gun is pretty straightforward if you're at close range. Mach 10 is definitely a meta SMG right now. Same kind of movement stats as the PPSH. It's actually slightly better, but it also has better TTK values as well. Then we've got the Bullfrog. Bullfrog's also a meta SMG right now, in my opinion. Not got the best TTK, but has really good movement, low recoil, big mag, and a lot of damage per mag as well. So the Bullfrog is definitely up there when it comes to SMGs. AK-74U, again, another viable SMG. Would I choose it over the Milano? Probably now. And if you kit this out correctly, you can get a pretty decent build for the AK-74U, so I do think it is a pretty good SMG. Origin Shotgun is usable, I suppose. Street Sweeper is definitely the better shotgun in the game. It's definitely top tier lore. Gallo's the best shotgun in the game, and I think this is a top tier upper weapon. The only issue with the Gallo is the reload time, so that's something you need to keep in mind. Hauer Shotgun is usable slash garbage. I suppose you could use it if you're pretty good. R90 Shotgun is definitely usable. Model Shotgun, I'd rather use my fist. VLK Shotgun is garbage. Jack 12 is worse than the Street Sweeper, so there's no point using that. That's bad too. The M80 LMG now, if you've watched any of our live streams, any of our gameplays, anything, you know I hate this gun so much. The movement is just way too slow. I think it's probably the slowest moving gun in the game. If I'm not mistaken, it's probably one of the slowest moving guns in the game. RPD is usable. You could definitely get away with using the RPD right now. If you kit it out with a loadout, it's got pretty decent TTK values. The Stoner is actually a top tier upper weapon. If you actually compare the TTKs now of the Stoner to some of the best assault rifles in the game, the Stoner is definitely up there in terms of TTK, control of the recoil, everything like that. This gun performs extremely well. And considering some of those long range rifles have really slow ADSs as well now, it's going to sit quite in line with the Stoner. So you could actually use the Stoner right now and do pretty well with it. Holger is garbage, man. It's usable because it's fully automatic, but it is pretty garbage. I wouldn't use Holger, to be honest. MG82 is pretty garbage too. SA87 is usable, a lot of recoil, but it does hit quite hard. PKM is definitely top tier lore in my opinion. M90 LMG, I made a whole video on this I think, and this gun was pretty viable. I mean, I would say it's just as viable as the Modern Warfare AK in my opinion. Brune is definitely top tier lore as well. Got to do good TTK, low recoil, all that kind of stuff. Finn LMG, if you're using the Finn, don't really use the adverse barrels because it increases recoil way too much in my opinion, but it is pretty viable, just the same as the Modern Warfare AK. Tundra is actually becoming one of my favourite sniper rifles, to be completely honest. I actually quite like this gun, but I do know it hasn't got the bullet velocity and stuff the same as some of the other guns. So for the Tundra, it's definitely going to be in top tier lore. It is a good sniper. I personally like using this over the ZRG, but if you are going for that long range bullet velocity, the ZRG is the better option. M82 sniper is pretty good now. It's semi-automatic still, but it does a ton of damage. If you hit someone with this gun, you know how much damage it does, so it's a pretty good sniper now. I do like the fact that they actually made this weapon somewhat viable. Pellington is just a garbage version of the Swiss and the Kar 98, so there's no real reason to use it. EX50 is usable. I mean, the Pellington is quite usable. I just don't like the Pellington. Dragunov, I would not use the Dragunov. Rytek's terrible too. HDR is top tier lore. 1911 from Cold War is usable as ground loot. Magnums are trash. Diamatis are top tier lore. Crossbow is trash. M19s, Akimbo, definitely top tier lore as well. I mean, these could be top tier upper depending on how you want to classify it, because obviously you're going to put them with either tempered or ghost now. So obviously they can't really sit with some of the better rifles and stuff like that, of course. But if you are picking up ghost or tempered, they're definitely some of the best weapons. We've got the Renettis, which are just bad Diamatis. We've got the X16 bad. Snake shot pistols can be usable. I tried them out recently and they are usable. I did want to try them out because there's new shotgun pistols coming to the game, and I just wanted to see how these felt in the game. So if they did balance it very similar to the snake shots, then would that shotgun pistol be viable? So we'll just need to wait and see when that drops, of course. Psychovs are usable in my opinion, but not as good as the Diamati or the M19s. The movement is just not there when you put on the 80 round drum mags. Desert Eagle's trash, that's trash. SKS is kind of trash too. I mean, I'd choose the SKS probably over some of these weapons down here. Crossbow's trash. EBR is worse than the SKS. MK2 carbine's worse than that. They've got the Kar 98, definitely still one of the meta sniper rifles, so I'll put this up here. You've got the SPR, definitely one of the better sniper rifles as well. I think it's top tier upper. It's not quite as meta as the Kar 98. You've got the Swiss, definitely a top tier sniper rifle as well. This is meta along with the Kar 98. These two guns are very similar, it's just personal preference in my opinion, depending on which one you like. ZRG is the best bullet velocity sniper rifle, so that is meta as well. So if you want the best long range rifle, then the ZRG should be up there. We've got the Carve, which is not great, but definitely usable still. We've got the AMP, which is definitely the best sidearm pistol in the game right now. And I think this competes very well with some of the SMGs in the game. And it beats these SMGs right here for TTK. So it's still a very viable gun. And with the 30 round mags now, it's even more viable than it was before. We have the C58, which is definitely one of the best long range rifles in the game right now. So that is definitely a meta gun as well. So that should definitely be up here. We've then got the MG82, and this is definitely a good LMG, but it's not quite as good if you're using it at long range. But if you're using this gun kind of closer ranges, you can still use this, and it has pretty decent TTK, so I think it's top tier lore. We've got the nail gun. The nail gun is usable. You can't really put attachments on this to make it any more viable than it already is, so it's nowhere near as good as some of the other SMGs in the game in my opinion. The EM2, definitely the best long-range rifle in the game right now. It's just got insane TTK values. This is the best, along with the Krig. These are two of the best rifles in the game at the moment. We've got the Tech 9s. They've got good TTK and good movement, but you just burn through ammo so quickly with this. And I don't really know why they're constantly adding like high rate of fire SMGs in the game. But it's definitely top tier lore if you want to try it out. I wouldn't say it's as good as the MP7 in my opinion. Next we have the OTS-9, and the OTS-9 is a pretty decent SMG. The reason why it's so good is because it's got Cold War movement and it has the fastest TTK up close in the entire game when it comes to SMGs, other than the AS Val for example. But it is one of the best SMGs up close. I mean, it's not too far off the Tech 9 when it comes to TTK, but you still get a slightly faster TTK, and the bullets don't really run out as quickly as they do with the Tech 9, so you can take out more than one opponent with it. And then lastly, we have the CX9, and I think the CX9 is definitely a meta SMG as well, because a lot of people are using this gun and they perform really, really well with it, and I've died a lot to this gun right now. So I do think the CX9 is quite a well-rounded SMG. For Warzone, you get a good mag size, the headshot multipliers there if you want to get those faster TTKs. So there we have it. Those are some of the best weapons that are inside Warzone right now. All the ones I would recommend is everything that's in top tier lore and above. That is the weapons category where you won't find yourself in such a disadvantage when you're coming up against those weapons as well. So you can still do really well with all these weapons up here. If you're using anything that's unusable or below, that is up to yourself, but you are going to be finding yourself in a disadvantage for one reason or another, whether it's movement, whether it's TTK, whether it's damage per mag. You are going to be missing out with some of these other weapons down here. If you enjoyed this video and you learned something new, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we're trying to reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers, and click that link in the description down below and subscribe to our second channel. We'll be posting extra gameplay content over there as well, and we will be going over the best class setups to all of these weapons in the meta category and the top tier upper category over there. So if you want to see what the best class setup is for all of these weapons, make sure you subscribe over there, and I'll leave a link to that video at the end of this one. And thank you very much for watching.